Hi everyone, it's Sandy, and in today's video I will be doing my July wrap-up, so I'll be talking about all the books that I read in July. The end of July was the reading rush, and the reading rush definitely helped me read a lot more books in the month of July, so I ended up reading 7 books this month, which I'm really happy about because I spent most of July not reading at all, and then the reading rush happened and I ended up reading 3 books that week, so that definitely helped the number of books that I read throughout the entire month. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with the first book that I read, which is I Wish You All the Best by Deaver. So I actually listened to this as an audiobook. I started it at the very end of June and I finished it on like the second day of July. Before I go into the synopsis of the story, I do want to give trigger warnings for misgendering, transphobia, homophobia, mentions of anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, and also parental abandonment and being kicked out of one's home. This story follows our main character Ben, who is non-binary, and they recently come out to their parents. Unfortunately, their parents aren't very supportive of them and they end up getting kicked out of their home. Ben reaches out to their estranged sister, who they have not seen in like a decade. They end up transferring to a new school and moving in with their sister, and at this new school Ben meets this boy named Nathan, who they befriend. As the friendship between Ben and Nathan develop, they also begin developing feelings for one another. Throughout the story, Ben struggles with anxiety and transitioning into this new phase in their life. I ended up really loving this story. Ben and Nathan were both fantastic characters, both together and individually. Nathan was just really charming and caring and charismatic, and I just love how he was immediately very friendly and welcoming to Ben. I love that Nathan introduced Ben to his friends and just completely incorporated them into his own friendships. I just really loved seeing their friendship and seeing that friendship develop into something more. Nathan and Ben's connection and their slow burning romance was just so beautiful and so well written. I also really love that Ben has a passion for art, and I loved being able to see that throughout the entire story. Ben has also built an online friendship with another non-binary character, and I really loved seeing that online friendship. I just really loved that the online friendship that Ben had with Miriam was completely normalized. They had a really great friendship, and I just really love that Ben was able to speak to Miriam about things that they were not able to speak about with other people. And talking about Ben's relationship with her sister, I really love that despite not seeing or even speaking to one another for over a decade, I really love that Ben's sister was doing everything that she could possibly do to make Ben feel safe and welcomed and accepted. She encourages Ben to go to therapy, and I really love seeing the positive portrayal of going to therapy and taking medication. Overall, this was an incredible and important own voices story. I would definitely highly recommend it, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is The Lovely and the Lost by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This book follows a 17-year-old teenager named Kira who was found lost in the woods when she was really young. No one knows who her parents was, and she doesn't have any recollection prior to her being lost in the woods. She was eventually found and adopted by this woman named Katie Bennett, who is an expert in training search and rescue dogs. And one day, Kira's adoptive mother's estranged father shows up, and he asks Katie for her help with a case involving a missing child. Since Kira grew up with Katie, she also has experience with search and rescue dogs, so she also gets involved in this search as well. So I thought this book was alright. I really love the concept of search and rescue dogs and the fact that it revolves around a missing child case. However, the story just didn't really keep me engaged. I just didn't care about the characters. I'm pretty sure this is a standalone, and since Kira was found lost in the woods when she was really young, she was like 6 years old when she was found, I believe, and she just doesn't remember anything about her past. The characters kind of felt one-dimensional. Like, all I knew about the main character was that she was found lost in the woods and that she still suffers from some PTSD from being lost in the woods, and I just wish that the author delved more into Kira's background and history. And the whole review at the end was kind of underwhelming. Like, it didn't shock me at all. This was just an okay book, and I didn't write a review on it after I read it, so I don't really know what else to say. But anyways, I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished is One True Loves by Jenkins. This story follows a woman named Emma who married her high school sweetheart Jesse. So on their first wedding anniversary, Jesse goes on a helicopter to go on this work trip. The helicopter goes missing and Jesse is presumed dead. So for the next 3 years, Emma grieves Jesse's death. She eventually moves back to her hometown, starts this new job, and she runs into this old friend named Sam. They begin dating and they are now engaged. And so one day Emma and Sam are at a restaurant with Emma's parents, and she gets this call, and it's from Jesse, who was presumed dead for nearly 3 years. So Jesse is alive and he's on his way home, and that kind of changes everything. So the first half of the story is told in 2 different timelines. The first timeline is Emma when she was in high school, meeting Jesse, falling in love with him, and getting married to him. And then we have the current timeline, which is her relationship with Sam. So now in the present timeline, Jesse returns home and he is immediately reunited with Emma, which causes a lot of tension in her relationship with her fiance, Sam. So I didn't like the cheating aspect that the story story delved into. Although Sam allows Emma time to make up a decision of whether she still wants to be with him or if she wants to go back to Jesse, Emma does have sex with both Jesse and Sam in a pretty short period of time, despite her not being officially broken up with Sam yet, and that just made me very uncomfortable. I just didn't like this whole cheating thing, and even though Sam is probably aware that she's having sex with Jesse, I just didn't like that. Emma was just constantly indecisive about her feelings, and she just went from one person to the next and back to the other person and back and forth and all this nonsense in order to decide who she wants to be with, rather than taking time to sit and actually think about it. But you know, you do you, girl. I definitely did have a preference of who I wanted Emma to end up with. Without going into spoilers, the love interest that I wasn't rooting for just felt very pushy the entire time, and I love that the other love interest that I was rooting for was very patient and accepting and loving of Emma despite what she's going through. I did really like that the story explores the idea that someone in your life may be your true love at this period in your time, but that doesn't mean that they will always continue to be your true love forever. And that isn't solely a romantic thing, it also applies to friendships. You may have a best friend in high school, but that doesn't mean your best friend in high school will be your best friend forever. Relationships are complex, life is complex, things change, and that's okay. And so while I liked the decision that Emma made at the very end, I felt like the decision was very obvious the entire time. So seeing Emma's indecisiveness throughout the story was just very frustrating to read about, and I still felt like the story wrapped up way too neatly. So as for side characters, Emma does have a best friend named Olive who is bisexual, and she's half Jewish and half Korean American. And although we don't see Olive very much throughout the book, I just really loved her presence in every scene that she was in. There's also Marie, who is Emma's sister. They've had a pretty rocky relationship when Emma was younger, but I did really enjoy seeing how that has changed throughout the years. And Marie has twin daughters who are deaf, and I really enjoyed seeing that representation. So overall, this isn't my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. Evelyn Hugo will forever be my number one, but I did end up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, maybe more of a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is the second book in Truly Devious. Truly Devious follows our main character Stevie, who is into true crime, and she goes to this boarding school in Vermont called Ellingham Academy. The school was founded by a man named Albert Ellingham, and shortly after the school opened, his wife and daughter were actually kidnapped, and it became one of the greatest unsolved crimes in American history. So in the present time, Stevie has been accepted to the school, and she is determined to solve this case. But then someone at her school ends up dying, and the story goes from there. Going into this book, I tried to look up recaps of the first book, and I really could not find anything, so I barely remembered anything about the first book prior to going into this one. I also listened to this as an audiobook, and it was just a real struggle for me to get into the story. I probably should have reread the first book, but ain't nobody got time for that, so I didn't. So trying to get back into the story was just a struggle, and unfortunately it led to me not enjoying this story very much. This entire story just felt very underwhelming, and there was not a lot happening to keep me engaged. There were a couple of new characters introduced, which may have created a potential love triangle that I did not like and didn't want to happen, but these new characters really didn't add much to the story other than being used as a cliffhanger at the very end. And then with Stevie's main love interest, David, I honestly have no recollection of who he was or what his role was from the first book. Like, I just did not even know a David existed, and I was like, who is this kid? Why is Stevie into him? Why is he into her? Like, I just did not understand. And so when he appeared in this book, I just had no attachment to his character, and I just didn't care about their relationship with one another. I also found David to be an annoying character throughout the book. I was frustrated with some of his behaviors throughout the story, and the miscommunication, oh my god, did not like that. And while we got some answers to one mystery, which was pretty anticlimactic to be honest, there really was not much progress made in the present mystery, and so that was kind of disappointing. So overall, I ended up rating this a 2 out of 5 stars. The next 3 books that I read are books that I finished during the reading rush, which I do have a reading vlog for, so if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. I will link it below. But the very first book that I finished is Mooncakes by Wendy Xu and Suzanne Walker. This is a graphic novel that follows 2 main characters, Nova and Tam. They are both Chinese American. Nova is a witch who is hard of hearing, and Tam is a non-binary werewolf. They were childhood friends, but then Tam eventually went away and they lost that connection. But then Tam enters Nova's life again, and they are reunited, and they begin working together to take down this bad group of people. I really enjoyed this graphic novel and the different types of representation in it. Nova has 2 grandmas that are in a relationship with each other, and I really love seeing them and seeing how supportive they were of Nova and Tam. I really love the art style. I did read an ARC version of this, so the copy that I have isn't completely in color, but I know that once this graphic novel is complete and out in the world, then it's just going to be stunning. And I thought the relationship between Tam and Nova was also super super, super cute. It was just so wholesome and I loved it. There really isn't anything that I disliked about the story, but I didn't love it enough to give it a full 5 out of 5 stars, so I'm just going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed, and this is a book that's been on my TBR for a really long time, and I'm glad that I was finally able to pick it up during the reading rush. This is a story that follows our main character Nyla. She has conservative immigrant parents from Pakistan. She is forbidden from dating anyone because her parents have plans to arrange a marriage for her. However, she has been dating a boy for about a year now, and eventually they get caught. Her parents are furious with her, and as a result they end up leaving the US and going to Pakistan. And in Pakistan, her parents have found a husband for Nyla to marry. So this is just a very heavy and heartbreaking story that follows Nyla as she is forced into this arranged marriage. So I do want to give trigger warnings for forced marriage, rape, drugging, and physical violence. This book just made me so angry and sad for the main character and what she's going through. Reading about the way her parents and her family members, particularly her uncle, were treating her just made me so furious. I do wish her relationship with her parents were more developed because they were just portrayed in a very stereotypical and one-dimensional way. As someone who doesn't really know a lot about arranged marriages or forced marriages, I felt like it would have been a little bit more helpful if the arranged marriage belief was explained a little bit more, especially since Nyla just had absolutely no say in this matter at all. This book is intense, it's hard to read at times, and I feel like the intensity of the topic of the story did not really correspond well with how the story wrapped up. The main character faced so many struggles throughout this whole story, and so the climax of the story felt rushed and the overall ending just felt like it was resolved a bit too quickly. So overall I rated this a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I finished during the reading rush and in July is Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Rees Brennan, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Link, and Robin Wasserman. This is a bind-up of 10 novellas following Brother Zachariah. I'm not really going to go in depth about my thoughts on this novella because there's really no way to really talk about it without giving away spoilers of what happened in other Shadowhunter books, but y'all know I love the Shadowhunter books, and I was really excited to get into this novella bind-up because of the character that it follows. Overall, I really like this collection. There were a couple of short stories I didn't enjoy as much, but for the most part, I enjoyed a lot of them. And if I were to rank the novella bind-up collections that Cassandra Clare has out, The Bane Chronicles is definitely my least favorite, and I think this is my favorite. Since this is more fresh in my mind, it's hard for me to remember Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. Either those two are tied or this is number one. I don't know, but I know that The Bane Chronicles is definitely my least favorite. So to talk about some of my favorite novellas though, I really liked Every Exquisite Thing, which follows Anna Lightwood, who is a non-binary character. I really like Through Blood Through Fire, which follows Jem and Tessa. I also really like the last two because the first one follows Ty and Livy. The last one was just so cute because I love Kit and I just love seeing his interactions with the characters in his life at the moment. It was just so cute and I loved it. The last short story was also making me super nervous about what's to come in the Wicked Powers. If you've read Queen of Air and Darkness, you know how it ended, and there's a certain character that shows up at the very end, and that just makes me super nervous and I'm not looking forward to it, and the whole chaos that'll probably occur and the people that will get hurt along the way, and I'm just not ready for it. But also I'm ready for it because I need more Shadowhunter books in my life. But overall I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. If you've read any of the books that I talked about, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next time. Bye!